I do not know who my mother was. They took me away before I could even speak. But sometimes I feel like I still remember her scent, like warm honey and wet clay after the rain. Sometimes when I scrub the floors in the mistress's house, the wood releases that same smell, and I freeze, as if something inside whispers, "You are not alone. Someone loved you. A long time ago. I was not born in this house, not in this country, and maybe not even in this body. Sometimes I think maybe my soul came here from somewhere far away, to walk through this fire, to never forget what freedom sounds like. I worked in the kitchen from early morning until late at night. My fingers were black from soot, my nails broken against the iron, my feet cracked from the stove's heat. But I knew how to smile. Mistress said I had a beautiful smile. She liked to show me to her guests. Look how she whitens her teeth with charcoal. She would say, as if it were my choice. But there was one day, one I will carry into the next life. That day, I was baking corn cakes. Hot oil splattered on my hand, and I cried out. And then he appeared, the new overseer, white with a voice like glass. He came up to me, looked at my hand, and said, "Don't scream, it's not pain. It's just a reminder." That was the first time I saw how a man could speak but be stone inside. He didn't see me. Only skin. Only function. Only a slave. Every morning I rose before the sun. We girls whispered poems to each other in a language no one else remembered. I didn't know what they meant, but my heart beat faster when I repeated those words. Maybe they were prayers. Maybe the names of the dead. We hid them in floor cracks, in the folds of our clothes, in the songs we sang while hauling water. All we had was memory hidden in sound. One day I saw Mistress looking into the mirror, for a long time, as if she were searching for someone on the other side of the glass. She touched her face, traced a wrinkle on her cheek, and said, "I'm getting old, and you're not. Why is your skin so smooth, girl?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know why her question cut deeper than the whip. And then there was the boy. His name was Eli. He herded goats behind the estate, spoke little, but looked as if he could see straight through you. We met at the old oak, where the earth smelled of damp leaves, and there were no foreign eyes, no foreign voices. He brought me bundles of herbs and told stories about how, in the old times, women could speak to the wind. "You're like that," he'd say. "You know how to listen to the earth." I laughed, and then he vanished. One day, he just didn't come. I searched for him, with my eyes all weak. I was beaten for being slow, for being distracted, but I kept looking. And after 2 weeks, word came. He had been sold to the South. I didn't cry. Not then. Not later. But something inside me went quiet, like someone had blown out the lamp. And since then, every night, before falling asleep on the hard straw mattress, I'd press to my chest the dried flower he once gave me. It was nearly crumbling, but I could still smell the forest in it. Sometimes I feel like God is a slave too, that he watches all of this from the heavens and cannot change a thing. Or maybe he's asleep. Or maybe he's waiting for us to remember who we really are, for the song within us to awaken, the one we sing through the whip, through the humiliation, through the centuries. My name is not the one I pretend to wear. My true name and voice are hidden deep inside. But one day, when I close my eyes in this body, I will hear them again. There was a day when everything almost changed. Master brought guests from afar, important people, with rings on their fingers and ribbons on their hats. The house filled with the smells of tobacco, powder, and rotting apples. We, the servants, were made to stand in a row. I stood third from the left, with lowered eyes and washed hands, in a clean apron. Mistress walked by, inspecting how we looked. She adjusted my headscarf like I was her daughter, and whispered in my ear, "Smile. They like you." And then I understood. Today, I was merchandise. Not a person. Not even a worker. Just a face and a body. One of the guests came over to me. He was old, and his breath smelled of iron. He reached out and touched my cheek. Then he said to the master, "The girl with fire in her eyes. How much for her?" I don't remember what happened in that moment. I only remember the earth swaying. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fear. Not for myself, but for the possibility that I might forget who I am if they took me away. But they didn't sell me. Not that time. Master said, "She's too young and too good for the fields. She'll stay with us." He thought he saved me, but I knew he was just holding me until the price went up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen and listened to the house creaking in the distance. The wind whispered something through the shutters, and it felt like voices, calling, reminding. I picked up the knife I used for chopping cabbage and ran my finger along the blade. It was dull. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe I just wanted to feel like I had a choice, that I could be free, if not in body, then at least in thought, or in pain. And then came the rain, a real, loud summer downpour. We all ran into the yard, barefoot, soaked, laughing. Even the old women, even the boys, even me. It was the only moment in many years when I felt alive. Not a slave. Not an object, just a body breathing, skin drinking water from the sky, a heart still capable of laughter. That night I told Zora, the old washerwoman, about Eli. She listened to me by the fire. Then she said, "You mustn't hide love. Even if it's taken from you, it's still yours. And it stays with you even when the body forgets the name it was called." I asked her if she'd ever loved someone. She smiled and showed me a burn on her shoulder. "This," she said, "he was a blacksmith, branded me with a heart, so no one else would touch me. And then they hanged him for knowing too much." I stared at that mark for a long time, and I thought maybe true love isn't in rings, but in scars, in what remains after everything has burned. Sometimes I talk to God, but not in prayers, just in whispers. At night, under the sheet, I tell him I'm tired, that I'm afraid I'll forget Eli's face, that sometimes I dream of a river I'm swimming in, and above it, light. Not the sun, not a lamp, but some inner glow. And I ask, "Are you there, Lord? Or is it just my imagination? If you are, send me a sign. Not deliverance, not freedom, just a sign that you hear." And one morning, I found a feather under my pillow. White, small. Some would say the wind carried it, but I knew it was the answer. Sometimes I think that everything around me is like a dream someone put me into. And each morning I wake not because I wanna, but because the chains ring louder than the sleep. But there are other dreams, the ones that come to me when I scrub the attic floors, where voices hardly reach. There, in the silence, I dream I'm sitting by the riverbank. I'm barefoot, the water licking at my toes, and the sky above me full of birds. And someone is there beside me. I don't see their face, but I feel warmth, like fire, like a mother. And in that dream, I am not a slave. I am simply me. There was a room in the house we were never allowed to enter, a locked door beside the library. Sometimes the scent of roses and the sound of a piano would drift from it. They said the mistress's daughter lived there, sick, silent. I saw her once, pale, with eyes like glass. She looked at me like one looks at a reflection in a puddle, as if she could see me but couldn't touch. We never spoke, but in that moment, I felt it, she was a prisoner too. Only her prison was inside. Many months passed, and with each day, I grew quieter. I stopped whispering songs, stopped running to the oak, stopped dreaming. I existed, but as if I didn't. Until one morning, I was scrubbing the porch when I heard a scream. A man's. Then noise. Then silence. The master had died. They said it was his heart. They said it was punishment. I didn't rejoice. I didn't cry. I looked at the tree in the yard, the one where they had hanged that blacksmith, and I thought, who will decide now who lives and who is to be sold? The house sank into cold. Mistress came out rarely. Meals were brought without words. The work increased, but the orders grew shorter. Everything seemed to tighten. And then one day, she called for me. For the first time, by name. Or rather, by the name they had given me in that house. Suddy, she said. I entered the room and saw the daughter. She lay on the bed like a broken doll. Mistress placed my hand on her forehead and whispered, "You can heal. I've seen it. When you touch, things grow quiet." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there. And then I placed my hand over hers. And for the first time in many years, I wept. Silently, without breath. Not from pain, but because someone looked at me and didn't ask for service, but for help. The girl died a week later. That night, I saw the river again. But this time, she sat beside me. She didn't speak, just looked. And when I woke, I felt as though someone had lifted a weight from my chest, one I'd carried my whole life. Then the rumors began. That mistress was going north. That the house would be sold. That we would be separated. Again. Once more. They gave me a sack and said, "Gather your things." My things? What was mine? The spoon I ate with? The scarf Zora knitted from scraps? Or perhaps the name given to me by strangers? I took only one item, an old wooden dish brush, because on its handle was a carved pattern. And Zora had once said, "That's the tree of life. It will remember you even when you forget yourself." Before leaving, I stood by that same oak. The earth was cold, the air still. I placed my hand on the trunk and whispered, "If my blood stays here, let it take root." And then I left. We traveled for a long time. The wagon creaked. The horses were angry, just like the men who accompanied us. There were 6 of us. 2 old women, a boy about 10 years old, a pregnant woman, and me. We didn't speak. Only our eyes, they spoke, asking, where, why, when will it end? One man, an overseer, smoked a pipe and spat constantly. He didn't look at us. He looked through us. When we arrived, I saw the new house. Smaller, darker, all around, only dust and trees. The smell was different here. Not spices and tobacco, but something heavier, like rust. They separated us right away. I ended up in the kitchen. Again. But this time, no copper pots or clean tablecloths, just a bucket of dirty water, cracked frying pans, and an old cook who talked to himself. They called me, "Hey." Nothing more. No one asked where I came from. And I stayed silent, because I was tired of being someone. Here I was just a body. Hands, feet. A machine. But even in that silence, I heard. The walls whispered. The stove breathed. In the corner lived a spider, and every morning I checked to see if it had spun its web. That was my only friend, because he was free. Even if they swept him away tomorrow with a broom, he would return. But I would not. Many days passed, or weeks. I didn't count. But one day everything changed. A guest arrived at the house. Young, with eyes the color of water. He came to the kitchen to get food himself. He looked at me and suddenly asked, "Can you read?" I froze. It was a trap of a question. If you can, you're dangerous. If you can't, you're nothing. I didn't answer. Then he placed a book on the table. He said, "If you ever want to open it." And he left. That night, I came back. Quietly. By touch. I didn't know how to read, but I recognized letters. In the house where the mistress's daughter lived, I used to sneak peeks at her books. In this one, there was a story about a bird who lived in a cage, but sang so beautifully that people would gather just to listen. Her name was River. I traced the lines with my finger and whispered the names out loud. I believed that if I said her name, she would come to me. Since then, I came to the book every night. Not to read, but to feel. To listen. To pray. It was my secret window. And one morning I woke up and realized I was alive again. Not with my body, but with my soul. Slowly, quietly, but alive. Then I saw him again. That guest. He was standing in the yard, watching the sunset slip behind the trees. I walked up to him. He wasn't surprised. He said, "I knew you would read it." I asked, "Why did you give it to me?" He looked into the distance and replied, "Sometimes a person needs to be reminded that they are not a thing." And then I understood. He had once been like me, not a slave, but a prisoner. Maybe not of the body, but of fear. Maybe of the past. We didn't speak anymore. We didn't need to. He left the next day, and I never saw him again. But the book remained. Time passed. People changed. But I didn't. I kept scrubbing, cleaning, cooking. But inside, something was building, as if someone had lit a candle and refused to let it go out. I began to tell stories. To the boy who ran near the kitchen, to the woman giving birth in the pantry, to myself, in the evenings, whispering into the quiet. I told stories about River, about the oak, about the river, and one day, even about myself. The old me, the one named Suddy, the one who loved, the one who believed. I don't know what comes next, but I know one thing. If I forget my story, it will die. But if I tell it, maybe someone will hear. Sometimes I think that everything that happened was not in vain, that every pain, every crack in my fingers, every sleepless night was not just suffering. It was a letter, written not in ink, but in skin, not in words, but in breath. And someone, someday, will read it. I kept having the same dream, as if someone was leading me across a bridge, tall as the sky, thin as silk. Below, water. Dark. Endless. I was afraid to look down, but the one beside me said, "Don't be afraid. This is not death. This is memory." And so I walked, not because I knew where, but because I believed I had to. That spring, I fell ill. At first, just a cough. Then, fever. They laid me down in an old storage room, where they used to keep buckets and coal. It was dark in there. No one cried in that place. Only me. Quietly. So no one would hear. I thought I was dying. That this was the end. But one morning, I opened my eyes and saw an old woman beside me. She was stroking my forehead and whispering, "You will not leave. Your story is not over yet." This woman was nobody. No one called her by name. But in her eyes there was so much light that I thought, maybe she was that bird from the book. River. She brought me water, herbs, but most of all, songs. She sang in a language no one else remembered. And every song was like healing, as if someone were stitching your soul back together with threads of light. I survived, not because I was strong, but because someone held my hand when I was falling. And then I understood, the most precious thing in this life is not what you wear and not what you eat. It's what you pass on, quietly, from mouth to mouth, from heart to heart. From that day, I became someone else. I didn't stop being a slave, but I became myself. I became Sati again. And I began to tell stories. Not loudly, not to everyone, but to those who were ready to listen. I spoke of the feather under the pillow, of the song above the river, of the girl behind the locked door, of Eli, of the pain that didn't kill me, and the flame that didn't go out. One day I was walking along the field and saw a little girl, barefoot in a torn dress. She was carrying a jug on her head and stumbled. The water spilled. She was frightened. She looked at me, and I saw myself in her eyes. I came to her, embraced her, and said, "You are not water. You are the river. Even if they spill you, you will gather again." And she smiled, the way I once smiled at Mistress. But now with strength. Now I sit beneath a tree, not the same oak, but another just as old. Above me, birds are singing. Once again, the air smells of clay and honey. Maybe this is the place I came from, or the one I am going to. I do not know, but I know one thing. If you are hearing this, you are hearing my voice. Through the centuries, through screams, through songs, through books and whips. I was no one, and became a word, a whisper, a force. I am memory. I am Sati. And if even one soul, upon hearing this, understands that their story matters, then it was all worth it.